I'm going to wait just one more minute to see if anybody hops on, and then I'll get started.
Great.
Welcome, Brian.
Morning.
Okay, I will get started here. Let me get set up. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this workshop about updating the State Solid Waste Management Plan, which we're now calling the Sustainable Materials Management Plan. And as you've probably seen, this plan is a big overhaul since the last one that we updated in 2017. So we're really excited to get this new information out to you and to get your feedback about it. I do have some quick introductions. I'm Bree Case. I'm one of the sustainability coordinators for the Bureau of Sustainable Materials Management, and I'm located in our Las Vegas office. And also on the call from our bureau is our bureau chief, Darren Winkleman, and we have Kayla Alm, who is the supervisor of our sustainability branch in the bureau. So both of them are located in our Carson City office, and they'll be here to answer questions as well as myself. Let's start off with some general housekeeping items. This meeting is being recorded, and this entire workshop, the first 30 minutes will be this presentation, and then the last hour and a half, I'll open it up for comments and discussion. So during the presentation portion, I just ask that you mute your microphone. If you do have any questions you want to ask while I'm presenting, you can put them in the chat. Kayla will be monitoring the chat box. And then once we get to the discussion portion of the workshop, we'll use that hand raise feature. And once we get to that discussion portion, I can show you how to use it if you don't know how to. And here's a brief overview of what we'll be discussing today during the workshop. So like I said, I'm going to start off with the presentation about the Sustainable Materials Management Plan, which will include some background information about updating the plan, the scope and purpose and structure of the plan, as well as some high-level waste and recycling trends and challenges. And then, like I said, after the presentation, we'll open it up for discussion and questions. So there is an NRS requirement to update the State Solid Waste Management Plan every 5 years, and the NDEP prepares that update on behalf of the State Environmental Commission, and then we petition the SEC to adopt the plan once we've updated it. And the last update was done in 2017. That plan focused primarily on landfilling and managing waste based on a linear model of materials management, which we often call the take-make-waste model. And this model is depicted with those blue arrows there on the screen. And the problem with this linear approach is that when products and materials are landfilled, their material value is lost. Whatever is not feasibly recycled, composted, or reused essentially becomes a loss of materials that could be used in another process. Also, the decomposition of waste in landfills can potentially pose environmental problems, such as the potential to impact groundwater or even the release of methane, which is a powerful greenhouse gas linked to climate change. So reducing the amount of materials that need to be landfilled is very important. I do want to note the 2017 plan did touch a little bit on recycling, so it wasn't a perfect linear model, but recycling and other diversion strategies were not the key focus areas of that plan, whereas that's what we tried to do in this updated plan. In addition to the problems I just mentioned regarding the linear approach, we're also seeing increases in the amount of waste being disposed of year after year, and I'll touch more on that in a later slide. But because of this increase in waste and the environmental impacts associated with that linear management method, we need to move towards a more sustainable approach. And this updated plan is based on a sustainable materials management framework, which this framework promotes a more circular approach focused on source reduction, reuse, recycling, composting, and most importantly, finding the most productive use of materials over their entire lifetime versus just focusing at the end of life. And we know we're not going to move Nevada to a perfect circular system overnight. So this plan is focused on laying that foundation of a more circular system and beginning the transition of aligning our waste and recycling systems with sustainable materials management practices. And based on the goal of moving Nevada to a more circular system, we've defined the scope and purpose of this plan in 5 main points. We wanted the plan to provide a comprehensive evaluation of the current state of our waste and recycling systems. We wanted to find ways to align waste management efforts with sustainable materials management practices, and we wanted to promote the development of source reduction solutions. Fourth, we wanted to ensure that any waste that does need to be disposed of is managed in a safe manner. And then finally, fifth, we wanted to provide actionable information to key stakeholders so we can better manage our resources and materials. And in order to accomplish what we defined in that scope and purpose, we developed 6 main sections in the plan. And this structure is very different from the 2017 plan, if you're familiar with that one. So the first section of this updated plan is a vision for Nevada, which that section lays out the overarching short-term and long-term visions that this plan wants to work towards. And it also explains what sustainable materials management is and how waste management fits into that framework. And then the next 3 sections, managing solid waste, recyclable materials, and hazardous waste, each of those 3 sections discuss the regulatory background of these waste and materials, how data is collected, trends, and then challenges regarding these specific streams. And based on these trends and challenges and the vision, we outline 8 primary objectives on how to, overcome these challenges or work on these challenges and achieve the vision. And then finally, this plan ends on a section called implementations considerations, which ties everything together and provides a general roadmap forward. And so for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to touch on the high-level items from each section and give a brief summary. And then I also wanted to point out Appendix 2, which is the County Atlas. And while the main body of the plan is geared more towards state level trends, if you're interested in seeing what the county level data is, you can find that in Appendix 2. So yeah, if you're interested to know what your county's recycling and waste data points are, that's where they're located. And then the other appendices are mainly just the current NRSs and NACs, should you need to reference them when you're looking at the plan. Now, this plan is guided by our Bureau's vision of having a Nevada where communities recognize and implement the sustainable use of all resources. And specific to this plan is the short-term vision of starting to lay that foundation like I talked about. We want to align current waste and recycling systems with sustainable materials management practices. The more long-term vision is establishing a truly sustainable materials management system. And like I said, that's a circular system, but it also is a system where each major phase of a product's life cycle is considered. We try to find the most productive use of that product, and we're not just focused on end of life. All right, so we're going to move on to the high-level trends for those 3 categories: solid waste, recycling, and haz waste. So we're going to start with solid waste. For solid waste, we looked at the last 10 years of complete data we had, which was 2012 to 2021. And during this time frame, total solid waste tonnages increased from 4.4 million tons to 5.7 million tons. And each year, about 4 to 5% of that total was imported to Nevada. And then for 2021, to give a breakdown of waste categories, approximately 66% of the total waste was municipal solid waste. So think, your residential and commercial trash and garbage. And then 34% of that total waste was industrial and special waste, which includes things like construction and demolition debris, industrial waste, medical waste, waste tires, and sludges. And looking specifically at MSW, that was generated in Nevada, that increased from 2.7 million tons to 3.6 million tons over that same 10-year span. And part of this increase is probably due to the increase in the population that has occurred in the state. But we're also seeing that the amount of waste generated per person has also gone up. So if you look there on the screen, MSW disposed of per capita has gone up from 5.3 pounds per person per day in 2012 to 6.17 in 2021. And unfortunately, we currently do not have a statewide waste characterization study to help us better identify sources of this increase, as well as what material types could be contributing to this. However, we are looking to make this characterization happen, but first we're trying to identify funding for such a study. And then here's the graph depicting the MSW totals in Nevada over the last 10 years. The blue is what was generated in the state, and then red is imported. And as you can see, it's gone up over the last 10 years. And then this chart's depicting the MSW generated per capita. The blue line here is what I discussed on 2 slides ago. It was that 5.3 going up to 6.17. So that's MSW disposed of per capita. But if we want to look at MSW total, which includes both what's put in the recycle bin and what's put into the trash can, that's gone up as well, 7.31 to 8.02 pounds per person per day. And recycling went down from 2012 to 2016, and it started to creep back up. The red line down here is the recycled per capita. Here are some high-level challenges we identified in the plan. With landfills in general, our inspectors have noticed windblown litter as a common problem at many landfills, and it is a challenge to deal with. Also, some of our more rural landfills have limited budgets for staffing and training, as well as a lack of scales for weighing waste. Some have to use volume estimates, while others that do have scales are able to weigh it. So that can present a data gap. Special wastes are another topic handled in the plan. We talk about household hazardous waste, emerging waste like solar panels and lithium-ion batteries, which have are potential sources for fires in MRFs and landfills. Medical waste and waste tires are just a few of the things we touch on in the plan. And waste tires being difficult to deal with because recycling markets aren't well developed, and it's just more expensive usually to recycle than to landfill. Another challenge involves product design. Many products are designed to have short lifespans, like single-use plastics or packaging, or products easily become obsolete within a few years when a new product hits the shelves. So this could potentially be contributing to our increase in that MSW per capita rate. There's also cross-jurisdictional communication barriers. It is easy to get siloed in government, whether that's within an agency or between state versus county or local. And then illegal dumping is another challenge that affects all counties. It's definitely a problem that needs resources and funding to help fix. And then finally, data gaps are a challenge. Like I mentioned, the lack of waste characterization of the MSW stream is a big data gap for our state. Excuse me. So for recycling data, we looked at the years 2009 to 2021, And the reason we extended this time frame back a few years is that we saw a spike in between 2011 and 2013. We actually met our recycling rate during those years, but we wanted people to see that trend, so that's why we extended it. So during this time frame, recycling tonnages increased from 695,000 tons to over 1 million. But despite this increase in recycling tonnages, Nevada still struggles to reach its 25% recycling rate goal. And the reason for this is that because MSW disposed of is increasing as the recycling tonnages increase. And if you think back to our recycling rate equation, recycling tonnages divided by recycling tonnages plus MSW disposed of, if the denominator is increasing at the same rate or faster than the numerator, then the recycling rate just isn't going to improve. Also, another trend I want to highlight is that 3 materials make up over 90% of the recycling tonnage that gets reported, and that includes scrap metals, paper, and organic materials. Here's a graph showing the recycling rate over time. Again, that 2011 to 2013 timeframe is when we met or exceeded our recycling rate goal. And then, and we haven't met it since. 2020 and 2021, we did come close. We were over 24% for the state recycling rate. I do want to highlight in 2020, we implemented an electronic database to directly collect data from recyclers and businesses. So that may contribute to the increase between 2019 and 2020. Also, the pandemic happened, and as we've highlighted in the plan, we did see some impacts to the waste stream and to the recycling stream in 2020 and 2021. So that also may have contributed to that increase. And then here's a graph showing recycled tonnages versus what was disposed of, red being what's disposed of, and then the blue is what was recycled. And for the 3 years we met the goal, you can see that MSW disposed of was down relative to the other years. And at the same time, MSW recycled was up. So again, focusing on, those two elements of the recycling equation will help us meet our goal. And then if you look from 2015 onwards, you'll see that recycling tonnages did increase, but so did the MSW disposed of. And then some high-level recycling challenges we're seeing. In general, market volatility and low commodity values can be a problem. For example, recycling glass markets typically have been poor. Transportation costs to get materials to market can be a challenge, especially in rural areas. There's also a lack of multifamily building recycling, such as like apartments, and that's a huge untapped source of recyclable materials, but there's also a lot of challenges with implementing programs in these buildings. High contamination rates can be a challenge with single stream recycling. While it's really convenient, to collect all that material, it's also easy for someone to put the wrong material in that recycling bin. Another challenge is a lack of emphasis on waste prevention. Again, going back to, the MSW is increasing, so we need to address that. And then finally, relatively low tipping fees at landfills versus some of the other diversion options or recycling options. And one thing that comes to mind, again, is the waste tires, more expensive to recycle than to landfill. And then for hazardous waste, so hazardous waste wasn't previously covered in the 2017 plan because the hazardous waste program is actually a separate federal program from solid waste that we manage for the feds. However, since we've taken a more comprehensive approach to waste and materials management, we thought a discussion around hazardous waste was important, especially considering the need to reduce toxicity of waste. So with Haz Waste, we collected data every 2 years, and that's why we have the 2011 to 2019 in there. And we, at the time that we did the analysis, 2021 data wasn't finalized. So during this time period, total hazardous waste imported to and generated in Nevada increased. More hazardous waste was imported to Nevada than what was actually generated in the state. and most hazardous waste that's imported comes from California. And about 73% of all haz waste that's treated and disposed of in Nevada is landfilled in a hazardous waste landfill after being treated. And then this graph shows the increase in hazardous waste generated over time. You'll see a large jump from 2015 to 2017, and this is partially due to a large retail chain that changed its waste category or waste generator category. So all of its stores needed to report. So we did have more reporters in 2017 versus 2015. However, this increase in the number of facilities that reported isn't the sole reason for the jump. And then for challenges, the main challenge with hazardous waste that I want to highlight is the lack of state-led hazardous waste source reduction policies and initiatives. Right now, our Bureau is mainly focused on enforcement and compliance, and that will continue to be a focus given the potential negative impacts associated with mismanaging hazardous waste. But our Bureau can expand to include source reduction efforts as well. And another challenge that we're seeing that's happened more recently is employee turnover at regulated facilities, which got worse during the COVID pandemic. And with high turnover, environmental programs often get overlooked and things fall through the cracks. So we start to see violations occur. So based on these trends and challenges, and then that vision I talked about, we developed 8 primary objectives to address those challenges and to work towards the visions. And in the plan, there are supporting strategies and action items that specifically lay out how we'll achieve each objective. And there's over 70 recommended action items. And if you're interested, I can pull them up at the end during the discussion portion of the workshop, and we can go into them in more detail, especially if there's an action item you have questions about or want to discuss further. It's just hard in a presentation format to go over 70 action items. But for now, I'll just quickly go through the 8 objectives. The first, we want to improve collaboration and communication between stakeholders. 2, we want to improve data collection and reporting for waste and recycling. 3, we want to expand and enhance education and outreach. 4, we want to develop or improve programs for special waste and emerging problematic waste. 5, we want to improve the effectiveness of and access to recycling programs. 6, we want to promote source reduction strategies for both solid and haz waste. 7, we want to establish or update solid waste and recycling regulations to align with SMM practices and to better protect the environment and public health. And then number 8, identify and create sustainable long-term funding opportunities, especially for waste and recycling infrastructure needs, special waste, illegal dumping, and any planning related to waste or sustainable materials management planning. And then for the implementation consideration section, this final section of the plan ties everything together and creates a path forward. It serves as a call to action to key stakeholders and encourages them to look at the recommended action items and see which ones they can incorporate into their current programs and what makes sense. You know, it's not going to, each action item isn't going to apply to every single stakeholder. And then this section also identifies priority action items from that objectives and strategies section. And then it, excuse me, and then it ends on a final note of how we can approach all this plan through the lens of environmental justice. And the main thing I want to point out with this prioritization process, like I said, there was 70 recommended action items. We can't do all of them at once. So we need to prioritize them. And we did this through a prioritization matrix where we scored each of the recommended action items based on 4 criteria, which was urgency, impact, feasibility, and stakeholder support. And based on the scores and using this matrix, we were able to identify the top 10 action items that our Bureau would focus on first. And we can discuss these during the presentation or the discussion portion. But I did want to point out that in the top three was the action item to identify and create sustainable long-term funding. You know, many of these action items will need funding before we can even begin them. So that's why that one was ranked so high. And we recognize the need for funding, especially for making bigger changes. So this is one more slide to touch on before we jump into discussion. These are some next step items for everyone after the workshop today. If you do have written comments, please submit them by September 16th. I did extend the date from the 1st to the 16th to give everyone more time. You can email them to me or mail them. And this information was in that original email if you need to get at it again. But we'll review your comments, make changes to the plan as needed before we petition the SCC to adopt the plan. So now I'll open it up to comments, questions, discussion. Please use the hand raise feature to be called on. And to get to the hand raise button, if you don't know where it is, it's located, it should be on the top of your screen. And you'll have to click on where it says reactions. And then once you click on where it says reactions, there'll be a drop down menu and you'll see this hand, it looks like a raised hand, and you'll just click on that. And then once we call on you, you can click that again and it'll lower your hand. So for this discussion portion, it's really open up to you. We can look at big picture questions about the plan. If there's a specific detail in the plan you need us to explain further, or if a comment about, was there something in the plan we didn't address that you think we should? I can pull up the action items and we can discuss them, but this is really open to all of you and what you need. But real quick, Kayla, was there anything in the chat box we need to discuss first?
Nope, you're all good to go, Bree.
Okay. So. Does anyone, any questions, comments?
Hi, this is Sarah with IVGED. I just wanted to thank you guys for the presentation. Great representation of the data between these periods for the updated plan. And I just wanted to let you know that if you have community generated household hazardous waste specific questions, that I'm available to answer those. We run a weekly community household hazardous waste program here in Incline. So I've got some on the ground data that I'd be willing to share if people have questions. But thank you for the presentation, and I'm looking forward to seeing the final outcome. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. No, that's good to know. Yeah, I don't think we have much data on any household hazardous waste collection. Okay. Well, not seeing any raised hands. Yeah. So yeah, like I said, if you have any written comments, I'm also available for phone calls. If you need to meet again. Darren, yeah.
Thanks, Bria. Just real quickly, so everybody knows, obviously this will go in front of the SEC. We're shooting for December as the next closest date we could get onto the SEC. And so we really appreciate your guys' review of this plan. Give us any updates before then, and if possible, any sort of support in front of the SEC is always a good thing for us. So I encourage you to look at it, and if we need to make changes or if there's something in there that doesn't look right, please let us know, and we value your comments and what we can add into the plan. And so our plans will mirror ultimately, Brian, your plan at SNHD, Wes's plan at Washoe County. And so we want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So anything you can add, this is the time to do it. And again, we're excited to have such a much more robust, kind of more open-ended plan. And so, yeah, any comments would be great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks again, everyone, for attending. Like I said, email, mail, or phone call. I'm here to take any comments or questions.
Great. Thanks, Bree.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.